Hey everybody, for today's video we're going to practice the bishop and knight checkmate on chess.com. So this is under their endgame drills. I'll put a link in the description below. They have 5 positions to practice, and then we can try the challenge mode. So in this first position we can tell we're very close to checkmate. The black king only has these 2 squares available. Our bishop cuts off c1. So what we want to do here is have the knight come to c3 to deliver the check on b1. So this knight delivers this check, and then we want the bishop coming to b2 to deliver that check, and that'll be a checkmate. So since the king is here, we'll start with the knight. King has to go to the corner, and now checkmate with the bishop. Alright, let's try the next one. So here, the king is in the correct corner. So when we have a light square bishop, we want the king on a light square. And what we're trying to do now is set up that last position we had. So we actually want this bishop delivering the check here, and probably even starting on the a6 square. And then we want this knight delivering the checkmate from c6 to b8. So let's start with repositioning this bishop. And now since he's attacked, let's back him up to a6. And now we have this position where we can deliver the mate. This time we'll start with the bishop, king will come here, and then we'll mate with the knight. So what I like about these chess.com drills is they're starting us simple and then making it more and more difficult as we go. So now we see the king is in the wrong color corner. We want the king's color on the corner square. So this is a green square, a dark square, to match the color of the bishop. That means we need the black king to either come all the way down to h1 or go all the way over to a8. And if we look at the current setup with our king here guarding these 3 squares and our bishop guarding this square, it makes the most sense to force the black king this way. So what we need to do is actually use the knight to get the king out of the corner. And the way I've learned this is to put the knight here. But I also see in this position we have a quick knight check that could get the king out of the corner as well. So let's start with the knight check. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit different. So now, because the king went this way, I'm actually going to try to force the king down to the h1 corner. So the next thing we need to do is get the king off of this square. And I want to use my bishop to do that. So now we see this king is ready to come back to h7, so we're going to cut him off with the bishop. Okay, the next thing we want to do is make sure that this king can't just start running all the way to the other dark corner. So we got to make sure that king can't escape. And the way that I've learned to do this is to start with the knight. And I'm just kind of checking my work now. I believe this is the best move for the knight. And if the king goes this way, we can actually check again, forcing the king off of that dark square, so the king would have to come back. And if we go knight here and this king tries to run out, we can go king here, and when it almost looks like the king is escaping, then we can go knight g4, which actually cuts off these dark squares, and our bishop will come in at the very end to cut off the remaining squares with the help of our king, which is here, cutting these squares off. So this is the most complicated move, I think, in terms of solving how to chase the king down the board. And I believe this is the answer. Yep, so now he's trying to run out. So here it's going to look like the king can almost escape. All of these squares are open for the black king. Right? It looks like he's about to escape. But now if we look at this position, the knight on g4 guards these squares. Our king guards these squares. All we need to do is make one simple bishop move, and that guards the remaining 2 squares, and now we see that this king is going to be boxed in. I should also note our king guards these and our knight guards this square. So this king is completely boxed in already. Alright, let's bring the bishop around to help out. And the way I've learned this position is we want to get the bishop here on e2, guarding these 2 squares, and then we can reposition this knight to e4 and create a little box, which I'll show in a couple moves. I'm not sure if this is the fastest, but let's try it. Alright, so now the king gave up ground on this square. Let's take control with the bishop. And here we see this king trying to run, but now this is what I wanted to get to. We can get our knight to this square in 2 moves. And we do that through f6 to e4. Now this is a position that I had in a recent simul game, and I highlighted how strong the knight and bishop are together. If you look at the squares these pieces guard, the bishop guards all of these light squares, the knight guards these remaining dark squares. You can take our king off the board, and the knight and bishop alone are trapping in the black king. That's the power of the knight and bishop with this setup. So now all we have to do is move our king this way and then start to push this black king down the board. So we're going to apply sort of like a downward pressure using our king, and we're going to keep pushing this black king all the way down to the corner. So we can see, because our knight guards this square, the king has to move backwards, and let's just keep pushing him back. Now at this point we need the help of our bishop. And like we saw in the previous exercises, we want the bishop to end up here on h3. And the king is still not going to escape, so we have time to play this. Alright, so now, once the black king moves back to one of these 2 squares, we have king g3. And the king and bishop will box in the black king by themselves. That means we have freedom to move the knight. And we know we want the knight ending up on f3 to deliver the checkmate. So let's reposition the knight, knowing that after the black king moves, we have king g3, and now we have that position number 1 where we can deliver the checkmate. Check and then mate. Alright, now it's getting even tougher. The goal is just to win this game. We're going to have to push this king up the board. And we'll need to use the knight and bishop to help out. And I'm kind of keeping an eye on if it says our moves are best or not. The way I've learned this is to kind of use the king in the beginning to push the opponent's king back. So we can see here that king is running to the wrong color corner, but that's okay because we know the technique. So let's just use our king again. And now we could move king up here, but I actually want to bring in the knight. Okay, so there he is, hiding on the wrong corner. So we need to get the king even closer. We could go king here or king here, with the bishop guarding a7. I'm not sure which is best, and it probably doesn't matter too much. Let's try... Let's centralize the king first. Okay, king d5 was best, good. And now let's bring in the knight. Okay, so we need to get this king essentially trapped to the edge. So let's use our king to force him back. Okay, that's sort of step 1. We got this king trapped on the edge. Now we need to force him over to the dark corner. It's a little bit different setup than we had before though, because we don't have our bishop here cutting the king off. But let's still try this. Okay, so now what we want to do is I want this bishop to end up here, and I want the knight to end up here. If we can get that, then we can create that scenario that we looked at before. We could also have this bishop end up here and the knight end up here. But the first step is going to be, let's get the knight into place. Let's get the knight here. I think that'll be best. Now we could play here to box the king out this way. Is there any advantage to doing that? Or should we just get the knight into place? Let's get the knight into place. Okay, so now if we look at where the bishop covers, guards this square. Let me show it with boxes. And this square, this square, this square. And the knight guards these. The king guards this one. So we have this king boxed in, but the direction we need to take him is down to A1. We need to get him to the dark square. What's the best way to do that? What I'd like to do is use my king. Let this king move a bit. No, I don't know about that. Okay, maybe I need to play king b7, because a6 is where this king is going to run. I almost need like a waiting move here. Okay, let's try this. Knight e2 was better, it says. Okay. So we have to be careful. This would be a stalemate. Let's go back. Let's learn this with knight e2. All right. So now, I think what we need to do is figure out a way to get the king a6. So what I did there, I'm actually trying to get the knight to b4, because from b4, it sort of creates like this hook. We're hooking the king down from a6 down to a5 and then bringing him down the board. So I'm using the knight. And this is the same position that we pretty much had before, but the board's just rotated. And it took me a second to realize that. But I'm relocating this knight to b4. And now once the king gets off of a6, we have this square defended. And now we can start trying to chase the king down the board. So here we need to make a waiting move though, because on the next move, that king will have to go there. So where do we want to wait? I think it makes the most sense. Well, we want the king here. Okay, let's make a waiting move with the bishop. Good, Stockfish liked it. Now I think we can go here because if the king goes back, we can check the black king down. Good. Okay, now it looks like this king is running again. We've seen this before. We've definitely seen this before. So what we want to do now, if the king runs here, the bishop can actually cut off this remaining square, and the knight already cuts these off. So we have a move. We have a free move here. What should we do? We have a free move. Do we just put the bishop into position? This is tough. Or do we move the knight? If bishop f6, we cut through the diagonal. This king could try to run back. Okay, let's start with the bishop. So what I'm trying to do is create that position where we have the bishop here and the knight here. And I'm using waiting moves. So after bishop here, the king tried to escape. But after bishop e3, I'm just sort of waiting. Now the king has to go back, and now I'm taking the extra space. So now we see him try to run, but my bishop is in perfect place to cut him off. Now I want to get the knight to this square. That was the next step. So here again we have that position where we boxed in the king. And now I'm going to force him down with my king. So when he's here, I actually want to get my bishop to this square. So let's make a waiting move. Now we'll relocate the bishop. And then here we have king and bishop ready to box in the king. So I'm going to go here once their king moves, and I get a free knight move and deliver the checkmate. All right, that was getting tougher though. Okay, this one looks even harder. We need to make sure not to lose a piece. I'm going to bring that knight back, and then let's start with the king. There he goes. He's running to the light corner. Okay, so now we can use the bishop to keep the king out of here, or we could go this direction. I feel like it's actually this direction. So had he gone to the corner, I knew exactly what to do, because I know the setup where you check, king goes back, bishop waits for one move, and then bishop here, and we just keep marching him up the board. It's when they run early that it gets a little bit complicated, because if we go bishop here, I don't know if our knight is in good placement. Now I'm ready for the setup. Now I know what to do. So it almost looks like I stalled for one move, but the computer is still saying bishop f2 was best, because now what I want to do is use the knight to kind of hook that king out of the corner. So I always think about it pulling the king away from the corner. And now the square that we need to guard is this one. And we've seen this before, where we move the knight first. If the king goes back, we would check. And then we almost let them escape, but the knight just in time guards these light squares, and then the bishop comes in to help at the end. Waiting move. And now we create that box where the bishop sits here, and we want the knight to come over here. We see that king trying to escape, but we're about to cut him off. And now we have the scenario where the knight and bishop completely box in the king, and we're going to use our king to force him up the board. Here we need just a waiting move so that our bishop can get into position. And I'm doing this a little bit fast because I've already shown it, but feel free to rewind, play it in half speed, pause it, think about the moves yourself. Now we bring the king up, and then we need to get the knight to the square. And here we have the check and checkmate combo. All right, that was it. That was all the exercises. So that was the bishop and knight checkmate. Definitely a few tricky positions, and this is one where if you just keep practicing it over and over, it becomes more and more natural. And even though you don't see the bishop and knight checkmate very often in your games, I mean, you could go a whole chess career, never have a bishop and knight mate. It's valuable for you to learn the bishop and knight mate because it really teaches you how the pieces work together, and it trains your visualization skills. Can you look ahead a few moves, figure out how to coordinate everything to get the checkmating nets? And also, even if it doesn't occur in a game, sometimes there's the threat of it occurring, and you need to be confident that you can checkmate with the bishop and knight if you need to. And also, it's kind of nice to know what to do with the lone king. So if you're playing the black pieces in this position, try to make it as complicated as possible for your opponent to deliver the bishop and knight mate. Because I think there's a lot of players that maybe know how to do it, they've seen how to do it, but when it comes to actually performing the checkmate, it's really difficult. And a lot of times in a late endgame like this, they're under time pressure, so they might only have a few minutes to figure it out over the board, or in an online game, and that's just not easy to do without a lot of practice. So this is chess.com endgame training, looking at bishop and knight mate. If you like the video, please click the thumbs up and subscribe for more content because that'll help our channel out. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.